Awesome. Good to go.
Well, we're good to go after a little technical difficulties there, but definitely want to thank everybody that stuck around here for a couple of minutes for another edition of In the Lead Off the Record. Today we got a pretty hot topic that's pretty applicable across the industry, as it's mainly a family-dominated industry, succession planning. And for those of you guys that have questions as we go along, feel free to chat in beneath within the actual Facebook Live post. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a like, follow our page. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all at The Lead Tool, so feel free to check out that too. A lot of content on there, but succession planning, we kind of hear about it a lot, whether it's on a phone call, trade shows we go to, whatever it may be. And it's kind of a touchy subject sometimes. There's
It's touchy. Everybody runs from it.
Exactly, and there's never really a formalized plan until things start kind of falling apart. So.
Yeah, very few people even bother to plan until shit hits the fan.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And Forbes, just doing quick research on here. Forbes, a third of all family businesses fail to successfully transition to the second generation.
Yeah, and I think most of them fail in the third generation. But yeah, the handoff is really sketchy. And understand, I say this coming from growing up in a family business, a 130-year-old family business, which
long time.
Yeah, it's a quite some time. So
as a lumber industry too.
Yeah, in distribution. So it's something that no one wants to address, which is really it's kind of
an elephant in the room.
Yeah, and it causes so many issues. Just I think about the things I've seen over the years. Because the longer you put it off, the worse it gets. You've got a lot of times you've got siblings. I think the most common cases that I've come across and that we hear about with our customers is you've got siblings. One has kids. Yeah. One doesn't have kids, or one's got kids in the business and one doesn't have kids in the business.
Yeah.
You've got, these kind of different situations, and it's like they don't, there may be one sibling that, wants to just do whatever the hell they want to do, and they don't want to give up the reins. You've got parents who don't want to give up the reins, and they bring their kids in, and
everybody feels like they're doing more than the other person.
It's just, it's that, and there's so much entitlement.
Yeah.
You see a lot of businesses that are literally they just have the family on the payroll. Like they're not even, some of them aren't even doing anything.
Yeah, pretty common.
It's more common than it should be.
Which is really what causes a lot of divisiveness.
It does. Everyone says, and people will, I'm sure, want to argue with me over this. That's fine. I don't really care. Everyone says that blood is thicker than water, but money's thicker than both those things. Because if that were true, like if blood were
that's
actually
some real Wall Street stuff right there.
Say whatever you want, but like the reality is everyone at the end of the day, like
money talks.
In most cases, when you look at, there are a lot of family businesses out there that are fractured.
Yeah.
I can
think families.
Right, and they fracture the family. Yeah. That's the other part.
Which sucks. Just sucks.
Yeah, right. There's a trucking company I can think of off the top of my head that that's exactly what happened. Parent didn't want to get out, sons wanted him out. He went in with another one of his kids on a different company, and it's like now they're running out of separate yards, separate. It's still got the same name, but it just
not under one roof,
right? And you think about kind of like all the things that happen as a result of that, and then we also see businesses being held back, like on a kind of like less heavy note. We see businesses being held back a lot because there's a lack of transition.
Yeah. Clear planning, goals.
You've got a younger generation that wants to adopt technology. Yeah. And you've got a 50 or 60-year-old
holding on to the way it used to be.
Mother or father who wants to do it, the way that they've always done it.
Isn't fairness, it works for them.
Yeah, but what worked yesterday doesn't work today. And
which is hard to grasp a lot of times.
People. It's not that it's hard to grasp; it's that people refuse.
Yeah,
it's
true.
like everyone's the home center seat. They just Home Depot just crushed it on their earnings. It's like stop.
Crushed it.
Like I'm not a big believer in being like, oh, your competition like freak out, but you have to.
It's like 5% or 6% over last quarter.
Right, you have to be situationally aware. So in the same way we hear people say that they don't have any competition, meanwhile they do very much show competition. They kind of think that they can just keep doing things the way that they're doing them, and so that they basically kind of brush off the suggestions that their children make, and their children are often younger. We talk to a lot of second generation owners who are maybe in their 30s, but some of them will have parents that just won't get out of the way.
Even though they're kind of an absentee owner at this point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not that it's like bad. I mean, I know when I was working for my dad, I loved working for my dad because he was so much smarter than me, and I wouldn't want him to get out of there, but he also was not an absentee owner type.
Yeah, he's hands-on.
So there's a big difference. Yeah, there's a big difference. It's like when you have these absentee owners, and there are a lot of we do see a lot of them. A lot of businesses, particularly in like the straight retail, are kind of lifestyle businesses. Yeah. For a lot of these owners, for sure. And that's fine.
Doing a couple million a year.
If you're gonna pass it off to the next generation,
or have plans to, if you're having kids now.
Otherwise, hell, call up a business broker if you're under $10 million, or if you've got over $5 million in earnings, call an iBank, and sell the thing.
Yep. But that should be a part of the conversation, Yeah,
you've got to.
What's your goal? What's your end game with what you want to do?
Well, there's so many things to look at, and it's like if you are going to pass it on to the next generation, your job is to actually set them up for success.
Yeah.
It's not to just sit back. So you have to keep that in mind, because there are people who are not going to want to do that. They're going to be like, it's a cash flow machine. I'm going to live off of it. And I mean, I guess if the next generation's okay with that, and they're getting it kind of handed to them, then so be it. Wouldn't be how I would want to do things, but
you got to determine that.
But you have to determine that with your successors.
Exactly.
You even have to determine. A lot of people don't even take the time to determine who their successors are.
Yeah. It's transparency, right? Which is becoming even more and more.
And those are hard conversations to have. I mean, you've got siblings who often are.
You're going to step on some toes.
And I mean, look, there are whole companies that are built around just helping family businesses formulate succession.
Just do a quick Google search. You can throw it there.
Yeah, there's the Gehrig Center here in Cincinnati is set up strictly to do that.
It also makes it uncomfortable for your other employees as well.
Yeah, that's the other thing is when it gets ugly.
Particularly if you want to retain some top producers, you want a transition period.
Well, they look at the next generation as their kind of paycheck. So
yeah, it's the longevity. It's kind of the next thing that's steady.
It's job security.
Yeah.
So and I mean I think that's
because
really
not everybody's cut out to be the boss.
No, definitely not. But I think that determine number one. Where do you want the business to go? Is there a second generation? Do you want to sell the business and take a liquidity event? There are a lot of great options for that. Most business brokers will handle smaller. Let's say you've got under $3 million in EBITDA. $3 to $5 million is generally where middle market investment banks will start. There's a whole bunch of those. So there are great sale options if you want to get out of it. But
if you want to continue, though, I mean, you need to establish a pecking order.
Well, if you're going to continue anyway, you need to be having these conversations because you need to be in line. If your children are working for you or your siblings are working with you, and you all aren't rowing the same direction, if one of you wants
dynamic.
If one of you wants to sell and one of you wants to just work until you die, I mean that's going to create problems. It might not be today,
but there are solutions. But
there are tons of solutions. But
you got to talk about it.
The first part of it is the communication.
Yeah,
everything centers around the communication. So. If there's a lack of communication, I think that's where so many people run into problems. And the reason that there's a lack of communication in most cases is because people are scared to address it.
Yeah.
I mean, they just are. And I understand, it's hard, but hard things are hard. Like Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Great book.
They're hard. So...
well, you got to have an organizational structure, too. Or, I mean, we talk about it. An organizational flow chart of kind of the pecking order of the company. I mean, that's a difficult, question to have, a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah,
but the sooner you can establish that.
And you've got to, you have to establish the org chart. You have to enforce the org chart.
Absolutely.
We talk to our customers. Some of them have org charts and they're just meaningless.
Yeah.
Have no leadership at the top, and that's bad.
That makes it difficult for the company to grow.
That's bad for succession. So I think the main things are, number one, figure out which way you're gonna go. You gonna keep it in the family, or are you gonna sell it?
Yeah.
Or you have someone who's going to take over and you're just going to retain your equity. Get on the same page as if you have any partners or you have children you're bringing into the business, discuss it openly with them. Make sure that they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, because if you're going to sell the business, maybe for them they want to get out and do something else. Maybe you've got a partner who wants to get out and do something else. So it's just really a matter of kind of establishing the baselines for communication. Then there's the whole thing. Okay, so how do we elevate successors through the organization? This is somewhere that I also have seen people go kind of wildly wrong, because in most family businesses it's just kind of, here are the keys.
Do what you want with it.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of my favorite examples is the people who are running car dealerships that have never sold a car. Like it's fundamental to you. How are you going to run?
Yeah, it's the same thing with a business coach that's never created or been in.
Right. It's like so.
Or a real estate coach that never sold real estate.
So
the list goes on. There's a lot of examples.
On Andy Frisella's podcast, he picked on everybody. Which great podcast, but if you're offended, tons of F-bombs. Don't listen to it.
Yeah. Which reminds me, if you're at work right now, you might want to put some headphones in.
If you're.
Sometimes this may not be.
Well, we keep it relatively PG. But Andy was talking about how there are all these business coaches out there who are selling you these things and they've never actually built anything. So it's kind of like that. So you don't want your successor, and the biggest reason you don't want your successor to have an easy path straight to the top without having performed key roles in the or tasks and duties in the organization is because no one in the organization is going to respect them. It's just not going to happen. If they don't see someone down in the trenches with them, they're going to be like, oh, this is a silver spoon, which you're already, when you're the son of the boss, which is what my dad was always like, you're the SOB when I worked for him.
I experienced that even with my dad being the head coach of the team. At the end of the day, you're held to a different standard.
It's the same kind of thing. So you really will do your successors no favors by giving them a really easy ride to the top, letting them bypass the hard stuff. And they're not going to learn, and that's not going to be good for the sustainability of the business if they have a next generation.
Exactly. So it's important for the business to have experience in all these different departments.
Yeah, and it just and that's a whole other thing, is how far do you want the thing to go? Because in the same way that you've got, if you're passing it on, they've got to build it or sustain it, at least modernize it.
At least bare minimum.
To get it,
you gotta adapt to the consumer that you're dealing with that day.
Yeah, to the next generation. But I do think I think the key there is the communication, figuring out how you want to transition. Is there a buyout? Is there an earn out?
Estate plan.
There are a million. Well, that's kind of part of it. But for succession, maybe it's like, I'm gonna work till I die and I'll pass you these shares.
Yeah.
Don't do 50-50. That kind of goes without saying.
There's got to be a decision maker.
Someone always has to be in control. There's a really bright.
What is it? The buck has to come to stop with somebody.
Yeah, there's a really bright, really awesome, successful guy here in town. Fascinating story. I think he wrote a book about it. But his sons worked for different divisions of his company. And he had an agreement where they were not allowed to work together on anything that he had started. So he had a manufacturing and a construction company, and they weren't allowed to work together through those two companies. Anything that he passed on to them, they weren't allowed to work together on, because he just said he was not going to have his family fighting over money.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happens. So I don't care what anyone says.
Here, take a look. Very public, right? So The Los Angeles Lakers, very well-known brand. I mean, even if you don't watch sports, I guarantee you've heard of the Showtime Lakers. That family, the Buss family, literally just went through this over the last couple of years with Dr. Buss passing away, and each of his kids got a portion of the Lakers, and there's just a messy fallout just a couple of months ago from the brothers trying to supersede the daughter's control of the team, and there was a clear plan in place from his estate on who's going to control the team. So it fizzled out, but at the end of the day, there was a clear plan in place.
Yeah, and that's why you need it, because that stuff almost always happens. And now that I'm thinking about it, literally off the top of my head, I can rattle off 10 family businesses that I know of right now that range in size from small businesses to over, call it multi-$100-million businesses that are all dealing with this.
Yeah.
And
they're
all fighting the same thing, and everyone's still, there's this false sense that, it's family, it's this, it's your family, but that doesn't mean that it's immune to anything that you deal with in the rest of the world.
It's nice, yeah.
So I think the key, and one of the reasons I'm talking about it that way is because I find that a lot of times, just in life in general, no one wants to address the shit that's hard. And this is hard.
Well, it's the path of least resistance, right?
And if you actually hear people talking about how hard this is, it's like, okay, so it's not just me, it is hard. So if someone hears this and they're like, oh shit, I get it, it is hard, then great. That's all I really care about.
But you're going to come out on the other end in a much better situation and place.
Yeah.
Not only a business standpoint, but I imagine from a family standpoint.
You
right?
hope to. I mean, and a lot of times, I think you can, that's a great way to preserve the family.
Yeah. Or at least give it a chance.
But there are a lot of times that there are bloodbaths with succession planning. But anyway, I think, if we're going to talk about the real keys here, it's number one, communicate with your team and your successors. Number two, have a clear plan for which direction you want to go. Is there a next generation? Is there a sale? Or is there an outside person, which I kind of lump that into the sale category.
Yeah.
If you're going to go down the path of having a successor that's in the family, make sure that if you've got partners, communicate with them about it, set up your close corp agreements, set up your stock transfer.
You can have a mediator or consultant help you do this if you need to.
There are people who can do it. I mean, if you can keep a mediator out of it.
Obviously, I think that would be your first.
Most people need them, but
well, it's it kind of takes all the personal out of it. Right? I mean, you got this nonpartisan party coming in to help mediate. Obviously, figure out see if you can do it on your own. I think that's got to be your first option.
Yeah, I would leave the mediator as the option of last resort for sure, because I think that generally when you get to that point, it's kind of like, okay, we each need a lawyer.
Yeah.
So it actually is, in my experience and from talking to some of my friends who have dealt with this, if you can just sit down and have the businesses that I've seen that have done really well with this, they're sitting down just having conversations about it.
Yeah.
So I think there's
and the ones that haven't.
Right. There are issues. I mean, some of them are just going to go out of business when the owner dies. So anyway, figure out how you're going to elevate and kind of move your successor or successors through the organization. Make sure that they do the crap details, clean the toilets and all of that, so to speak. I did it literally, but figuratively.
A lot of times that things like that. I mean, you're starting at a pretty young age.
Yeah,
kind of going through there.
Yeah, I started when
I was
12. So,
but anyway, as you start progressing, taking on more responsibility.
Yeah.
Again, the earlier you can start forming this org chart, if you will, and having clearly defined roles within the company in terms of your succession, the easier this conversation is going to be.
Yeah, it's.
If you're not having it, the more difficult it's going to be, because at some point, the train's going to come to a stop here, and you're going to have to confront it.
Yeah, and that's when it usually gets particularly ugly. But making sure you've got a well thought out plan of how you're going to move the successors through the organization. And if you're not going to do that, there's nothing wrong with a sale. There are a lot of great options for that. Just make sure that you're all on the same page. figure out how valuing it is kind of like a black art unless it is in like the middle market range, that 3 to 5 million in earnings, not revenue, in earnings and up. That gets a little bit easier, but anything below that, it's kind of like you get people who think they have a $10 million business and it's doing $400,000 a year. That's not a $10 million business. So, set a fair valuation. There's a lot of mechanics that come into that. There's so you've got valuation, you've got how do you want to be paid. Think about what you need to live out your life and how long you need that to go and where you're going to put that money in order to make sure that you can sustain the lifestyle that you have.
Okay. Keep going. I'm going to throw you a curveball here in a second.
And then, aside from... Shit, I lost my train of thought.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for that. So you set the valuation, figure out how you want to be paid. Is it seller financing? Is it debt financing? Is it an all cash transaction? There are a lot of great options actually through some private equity groups when you get into the higher revenue range. Earnouts with them where basically you do a flip where they'll buy 80% of the company from you, you retain 20%, and then they build it up. You take their capital, you throw fuel on. Now you gotta want to grow. We talk to a lot of people who are like, I don't want to grow, which I don't really want to talk to them.
Moral of the story is you got options.
There are a ton of great options out there. It's just a matter of communicating about all of it.
Now my curveball, I'm going to switch it up on you for a second. Let's talk about the scenario or the organization company that has, the long-term boss or maybe even the founder of the company, the son's 30s, 40s, kind of that next generation that's going to take over. They got a succession plan somewhat in place, but they may not be in an active role as an owner anymore, but they haven't quite given control to the son or the daughter to start making some of those key decisions in the company, things of that nature. What kind of impact can that essentially have on the company, or more importantly, how do you essentially have a conversation or get into it about where that younger party kind of wants to make some changes to the company to start the progression?
Well, you have the conversation the same way you have any other conversation. You sit down and you just got to talk about it. The impact, you sit down. If it were me and my dad, I would sit down and say, Dad, you're on vacation all the time, which is a really hard thing for me to imagine. Or you spend half the year somewhere else. We've got these needs at the business that I need to address, and I'm waiting on you to get back to me, get off the fishing boat or golf course or whatever you're doing, which is not a totally unrealistic scenario, I guess, based off some of the conversations we have.
For sure.
I can't, it's getting in the way of the business. And the impact is, where we see it, where I see the impact the most is just like evolving the business in general. Like throw growth out of the window, because I know way too many people are going to listen to this and be like, I don't care about selling more, which that just short circuits my brain. But that's a conversation for another time, not on this podcast. But it gets in the way of the evolution of the business, because even if you're like, I'm cool doing $2.5 million a year, the way you got to $2.5 million, the way you got to $2.5 million a year 5 years ago is a hell of a lot different than the way you do it today.
I say that 5 years from now.
5 years. Well, 5 years from now, we will have gone through another major recession, and that's right now everyone's we're just like so busy. And then soon they're going to be just not busy. And then all this stuff that we're talking about today, succession planning, that's as soon as you're squeezed, that's when all the little issues start to come out.
Everything surfaces, right? It's everything is no longer good.
It just the impact there is that the business cannot progress, it can't evolve, and that could have an impact on your employees, right? Forget about your sales for a minute. If there's, let's say, expensing stuff is great. You've got an outside sales staff, like a lot of yards do. There are little apps that you can put on an iPhone or an Android to log your miles and track your expenses. And it's if you're waiting on someone who's not there to okay something like that, like your employees are they're going to get sick of stuff like that. They get believe it or not, there are employees who get really sick of not having a CRM. Yeah. They get sick of not having a tablet. And these are things that we actually hear of, like, owners who aren't kind of turning, like, supposedly they've turned the reins over, but they really haven't. Yeah. Like, that's the type of stuff
you get one portion of the family ownership group that wants to kind of transition into this next phase, reinvest in the company for today's expectations.
Redo the facility. If you're a retailer and you've got items hanging on the wall,
and you haven't done it for 20 years, it's going to be pretty dated by today's terms.
It's like the best examples from that Perch article. It's like, the hardware store with the faucets hanging on the wall versus Perch's amazing showroom with a kitchen and a spa and bathrooms. Like, it makes it look like an animal trophy.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the major impact, but a lot of people are scared to have the conversations. And the other thing too, I will say, is that a lot of these, the one thing I enjoy about what I do now is that you don't have to. And I see some of my friends sometimes dealing with this who have been in family businesses, is they're kind of beholden to their parent or whoever because it's like, you're like
asking for permission.
Yeah, and they've
never really been empowered.
In your 30s, you shouldn't have to be doing that. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, I would take...
Particularly if you are the next in line to take over.
I would take, forget a massive paycheck working for somebody like that. Like, even if it were my family, I'd rather go out and do something ridiculous like start a technology company.
Yeah. Crazy.
So,
Crazy that you would do that.
Who does that? But yes, I think there's massive impact there, and I think that this topic, I know we've bounced all over the place. There's so much to talk about. This wasn't designed to be like a webinar. It's more of a informal discussion. Yeah, but I think the real key is that this shit is hard, and it's way harder if you don't talk about it. So have the hard conversations. Like, when the mediators get involved, when the lawyers get involved, that's when that it's just
deteriorating.
Put your seatbelt on at that point. Yeah. But there are a lot of wonderful resources like the Gehring Center here in Cincinnati. They are dedicated solely to working out succession plans to literally like help you do a succession plan with your successors, and like so the difference between them and like a mediator is they'll facilitate the conversation. They'll be like, here's what you need to think about, which is good for anybody because like,
there's going to be things that you may just not be thinking
somebody who's been running a sawmill for 30 years is not the expert on succession planning.
Yeah.
Like, they're the expert on how to turn round logs into rectangular lumber. You know what I mean? So it's not hard to find resources for stuff like this, but it's a massive, massive issue. And it does, like, I've seen what it does to employees when there's too much family bullshit in the atmosphere. It's just it's bad. It's bad for morale. And like, this is where it goes outside of you, right? It goes outside of you and your family, because you might not think much of it or whatever. You might not care if there's tension there because it's like, oh, it's just my kid or it's just my dad. But like, it is toxic for the entire environment, and that is a cost. I don't think you can put a dollar amount on that.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely agree. I think that's a good place for us to wrap up today too.
Yep.
So, for those of you guys that are checking it out, again, give us a like. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all at the Lead Tool. Tons of content on there, from videos, conversations like this. Hopefully, you guys got a couple takeaways today. Otherwise, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we jump on here to talk about different topics that are relevant to the industry. So, tune in, share far and wide. Otherwise, definitely want to thank you for your audio people out there. We are now on SoundCloud. SoundCloud. So if you're a podcast, driving into work, if you like to listen to that, check it out. YouTube for additional videos.
And I think next week we're doing taking control of the sale.
Yeah, absolutely. So next Wednesday we'll be discussing controlling the sale. Whole breadth of topic there too. So. Like I said, feel free to tune in, share far and wide. Definitely thanks for checking us out today. Hopefully you guys have a strong rest of the week.
Thank you.